Ta-da. Look at that. Now we look like we're actually streaming and we have sound, I think.
Hey.
So hopefully we will enjoy the experience. I'm going to put my phone on as a monitor for a second, maybe.
Okay.
No need. I'll just listen to myself live on my computer and drive myself crazy. When you listen to two things at the same time. Live on my computer and drive myself crazy. Yeah, we're talking. Listen to two things at the same time. We're doing real good. Yeah, yeah. And thank you to Josh for that. We're doing much appreciated. I'm going to mute me because I don't want to hear me here and hear me there. That's probably too much. So I am joined today by my friend Kevin. Kevin, thanks for joining us. I always call you Nit, so I'm going to
Yeah.
immediately revert to that in like 5 seconds. But
Please. Yes.
yeah, we had an original concept here, which was to talk about the games that we're currently working on and designing and hold ourselves accountable for the fact that we say that we make games, but then a lot of these just end up in the junk drawer. That's,
As they should for some of these games. Not all the games deserve to get out of the junk drawer. To be fair.
I don't know. I mean, it's like you see a lot of other games out there, so I feel like we can let them out of the junk drawer if we want to. But what I want to talk about is a couple of our projects today. Nit and I have done a couple games individually, and we've done some things where we kind of like play off each other's ideas too, and talk about the things that are exciting to us individually in their game space and why we're continuing to develop these things. We've got some goals and standards of conduct for ourselves. We're going to make sure that our participants are respected, whether that's us or in the future, maybe even more people, that our discussion is positive and affirming, where we can really focus on the fact that we're making choices, not whether or not things are good or bad. The door's always open. So if for some reason one of us is going to leave, we're just going to leave. We're not going to make that a big deal. That's just how life goes, and it's not held in judgment. And that we're going to interact with chat if it makes sense, but it's not the only reason we're here. So if we don't interact with your ideas, sorry about that. It's just us trying to continue on our own train of thought, which is a thing that we sometimes do. So let's talk about games. I was going to talk about the concept of dragon riding, the new version that I'm about to do with that. I want to talk about a kind of percentile-ish, loosely Final Fantasy-based thing, and I'd like to talk about kitchen contests so that I can hear all of your better takes on what to do with it.
Okay.
What were you planning on talking about today, Ned?
I the one thing I have like Sharps. I'm revisiting my game Sharps. That's like a big old ripoff of a lot of what's this fucking name of fucking the guy who wrote Burning Wheel. A lot of his designs and the guy who
Yep.
wrote Mouse
Luke Crane?
Mouse Guard.
Yep.
Yes, Luke Crane. Thank you. I don't know why. Just totally slipped. Just a rip off of a lot of his ideas, trying to like make them my own and trying to make them a little bit lighter. But with there's a dice system in there that I think could work, but I have not tested it all. And I think I'd like some feedback on that because I don't know. It's super weird and niche, but I think it'd be fun. And
Yeah.
let me see. I think that's the one. And then I'd like to riff off of your ideas, like kitchen contests. I can easily riff off of that and think of spout off of like a dozen hacks. I'd love to do with the kitchen contest because oh god, I love kitchen contests so much.
Thank you, and I
It's
really
so good.
appreciate that. Yeah, because it's a terrible idea, but I think the thing that works really well, it's not. But we're
Oh, oh
always going to be self-deprecating, right? That's important.
yeah, of course.
Um,
Yeah.
no, this is, I think, a really good couple things that we can talk about. First off, okay, so my opinion, number one, is that
Mhm.
there are no new ideas, meaning that ideas that are derivative, it's like art. If you have seen a
Yeah.
painting of a still life and you see another one, that doesn't mean
Yeah.
that somebody ripped off the first painting's idea, right? I mean, there's only going to be
Yeah.
so many ways to interact with fiction and
Mhm.
with games. We've got to be okay with the idea that we remix things.
Mhm.
I also don't like the idea of holding an old edition of something that people have played in their youth or past on such a pedestal that it can't be touched or re-examined. Because if you do
Mhm.
that, then I mean, why the heck bother playing the game?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's good. And then also being self-deprecating. Yes, we're going to do that, but we should be okay with the idea that other people like our ideas. I
Yeah.
mean, we have some cool ideas apparently.
And if I didn't think that Burning Wheel was worth ripping off, or if it was untouchable, I wouldn't have made the thing. I wouldn't bring it up. I think it is a good game. It's inspired me, and I have my own takes on it. I have interesting things to do with it, but I acknowledge that it is a heavy inspiration, more so than is ripping off is my way of saying it. It is heavily inspired by this thing, and I'm trying
Right.
to pay some homage to it, and like how much I appreciate the design. I wouldn't
Sure.
rip it off. I don't like it. Yeah.
Hey, Jess, how you doing? We've got Burst of Hope with us.
Hey.
All right. So I'm going to lead off, unless you'd like to lead off, talking about a game design idea. As much as I was planning on talking about dragon riding, I'm kind of feeling like with all the stuff we just said, we should talk about kitchen contest and kind of like give ourselves something to spring off of.
Yeah, I'm super down. I'd love talking
So
about kitchen contests.
let's do that. Give me a second here as I prepare my browser window for that game capture. I'm going to do that thing where it sounds like I'm listening to you, but I'm really thinking about something else for a second.
Yeah, yeah. And like, not even trying to, not even trying to blow your head up or anything, or like inflate your ego. Even if we weren't friends and I saw Kitchen Contest, I would love it so much. It's become one of my favorite games lately. I cannot stop playing the solo mode. It's so much fun. I don't know. It's something about it just like speaks to me so deeply.
I do think that is just generally going to make me have a swelled head no matter what. I don't think there's a way you can
Good.
do that
Yeah.
that wouldn't just make me act like a complete dork.
I mean, that's
Um,
only half the intention.
yeah, right. And I appreciate that. Okay, so I've got a new source here, which we're going to call Acrobat Capture, because of course I've made the choice to have some things in one format and some things in another, and I feel bad about it, but I'm owning it.
I mean, we can't hold our previous selves accountable for their poor decisions. We just need to accept them and move on.
True. True. If only that was how life worked. Okay, so we've got that. We're going to blow it up a little bit. We're going to do some trimming. This is so close to ready. Okay, and we're mostly going to get a big old chef's head in the middle of this, so it's going to be great. Okay, we've got that. What am I seeing on the side here? Weird icons. No thanks. I am using Adobe Acrobat Reader if anybody needs that validation, but otherwise I'm going to hide most of the designy stuff so you don't have to see all that at the same time. Okay, there is that. It's all trimmed up. Looks really pretty. I'm going to close that so I don't accidentally do something to it, and we're going to transition. So we've got Kitchen Contest in big orange letters. Okay, looks beautiful. That's probably the best I'll ever do with anything. So number one thing that I like about Kitchen Contest is that it's competitive. And the thing that I like about that is I don't think there are a lot of games where they encourage you to be competitive with your friends in a way where you can have fun winning or losing. I
Yeah.
really like losing in games. And
Mhm.
what I mean by that is there's not too many games where I feel like my experience is more fun when I try to beat my friends. There will be that occasional playthrough where I'm like, I'm going to win this one for sure. But like, I think there's a space and play for a game that you're going to lose and that is going to have a satisfying outcome. And there's
Yeah.
so much time between beginning and end.
Mhm.
And I am a journey, not the destination kind of player. Like, I want to find out what happened in the middle of the game and why you lost, not just lose.
Yeah, and Kitchen Contest does that really well. I think that speaks to like sort of a lot of people who take the game master seat or the dungeon master seat in role playing games. Like they're happy to lose. They're happy to be like the bad guy and take the punches so that everybody else can get lifted up and have their stories. And like they are the ones put up on the pedestal and they get the to act as the obstacle to be overcome and things like that. I think it really speaks to that, and I tend to enjoy that play myself as well. And I think like when we played like in our little private game and yeah, how you played. I, was it KitchenAid?
Yeah,
The KitchenAid sponsored
I had a
chef,
guy
and
who
like
was
he was the
very
heel,
sponsored.
and yeah, that was so much fun, and like it helped everybody else, like sort of all the other players, like sort of banded together, and like our dislike of that character, and it was so much fun. Like it's yeah, being the bad guy, being the loser, not winning, not having the goal of not winning is a very valid take, and I think it's admirable in a lot of games, and not enough games like sort of emphasize that, and especially competitive games.
Yeah, I think the thing that's fun about a game where you can be competitive, if you know how to do it well, you still get the chance to have all of that fun with your friends. But
Mm-hmm.
then there's that question of like, is this going to pay off? Is this going to be fun in the end? And if you
Mm-hmm.
get the chance where it is, I mean, I like it. That's something that's fun for me. So Kitchen Contest, first off, I have blown up the screen where it shows our credits, just so that it's very clear that you are my editing advice person here on this. So this is a sponsored pod or a sponsored stream where we are our own sponsors promoting our own work. To be frank, that's about as funny as it gets. But the thing that's nice about Kitchen Contest, if I now scroll all the way down to where we actually see the game being played,
Mm-hmm.
is it is intended to be fairly GM-less.
Yeah.
So here's another thing that I think is important with a competitive game. This isn't you versus a game master or you versus your friend who is somehow simultaneously the game master and also has their own character, that's
Mhm.
always the worst thing ever, is when you have to be in a game to compete with the person controlling both the universe and a spotlight
Mhm.
character. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, I've done that a couple times, and a couple of them have been the kind where it's like, I don't know why I showed up. Why didn't you just save the village and kill the dragon? And I would have just like stayed home and played Xbox.
Yeah.
So, but this doesn't have that. This has the very simple goal of you know what the outcome is before you start the game, and then you try to change it so there is some agency and some involvement in playing the game, but your best case scenario is you're going to play the game. The
Mhm.
play is the thing.
Yeah.
So with Kitchen Contest, we start out with a really simple concept. We have a set of dice, we roll them. And then all those numbers have a representation in what the end goal is going to be. Mostly in Kitchen Contest, we come up with sums. So, like, a 1 and a 6 is a 7. So we're trying to match a 7. And the farther away our dice are from that goal, then the worse we're doing. Um, that's pretty much it. And there's no real special tricks to Kitchen Contest. You just roll, and then we go through. You have to have like a chef and a judge. Um,
Mhm.
I'm kind of going too fast for this because what I should talk about first off is we look at this. We've got the idea that you're going to set your goals. That's going to be the game outcome. That's number one here on the screen. Then you're going to roll your stakes. That's your set of dice. You have exactly the same number of dice as the game does, and then you try to make the match. That's it.
Mhm.
We played this game together recently, and we played with another player who immediately rolled almost the identical pool to what was in the goals. I think she was, what, one number off. And that was pretty ridiculous
Yeah.
for
One
us.
die was about one digit off.
Yeah, yeah. So it was fun because
Yeah.
we could play a game and think, well,
But like
we know who won.
none of us were like actually mad about it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Nobody was like everybody like sort of exaggerated like oh this is bullshit like but nobody was actually mad about it. We're all like excited to see that how we sort of justified that action and how we played off of that with the other player having such a great advantage over the rest of us. Like it wasn't like a bummer like it would be in another competitive game. Like to see another player with such a great lead.
I think the good thing is too, depending on the person you are, it gave you a lot of room to wiggle around. Like I looked at
Mhm.
my dice and I was like, "There's no way this is changing. I have lost this game. I am okay with losing this game," and I just had fun with it from there. But like your character had a very competitive pool. You were doing real well,
Mhm. Mhm.
and we had a fourth player, and they also had a really competitive pool, and we got some very fun rounds out of that.
Yeah.
So I think that's good. Um, Now I've talked about myself and my game, so of course this is the point at which what's the term I'm looking for? Like politeness, like manners dictates that we talk a little bit about your game. So give me a second here while I set up a transition. But let's talk about closed fists.
Ooh, close fist. Okay, yeah, the close fist that I sort of yeah, it's a hack.
Hang on,
I
let's.
guess I call it a hack of Kitchen Contest because it's heavily inspired by Kitchen Contest, if nothing else. And it is a game where you punch your friends.
I mean, really, what more do you need in life? That's everything I need.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm trying to do is just gently nudge my browser. Nope, not like that. Okay, let's try this again. I'm trying to gently nudge this window. No, 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 no. It insists on selecting everything, and I don't want it to do that. I admire its tenacity, but it's not helping me out. Okay, we're going to leave it. Because as it is, you can see closed fists on the screen. It's a little bit cut off, and that's just me being terrible at games
Oh yeah.
and the internet. But we've got closed fists. So let's talk about how you've used the concept. So what is closed fists about?
Close Fist is taking like sort of the I guess the engine of Kitchen Contest and that competitive nature and the GM's nature and applying it to like sort of a martial arts duel of sorts. And I had seen Kitchen Contest and I thought it was I was super inspired by it and I saw that there was that some folks in the scene were hosting the Asian martial arts jam over on Itch, and I thought this would be that Kitchen Contest being competitive, and like if you kind of took a martial arts lens on it and made it a two-player thing, that it'd be perfect for that. And sort of, I came up with this idea where in which instead of making cooks, you make fighters. Instead of talking about where the sort of scenario in which you're cooking, you're going to talk about the scenario in which these two people are fighting, and then each of these two players once they have made their fighters once they've decided on the field in which they're fighting they are going to roll a pool of dice. They're going to roll 3d6, and then that is, or actually no. First, they're going to pick a move from a list of different moves that like modify your what you're able to do. So you're picking a move blindly based on you have no idea what your dice are going to be. So it's a big gamble. And then after that, you're going to roll 3d6 for your pool of dice, and then those are going to determine like from those three dice, you're going to pick each hand, and those are what you're going to compete with. And then every round, you have a hand. You present your hand, which is your one of the 3d6, and to the other player. You announce if you are using one of your techniques or not, and then you resolve the techniques, and then you show each of the die, and then whoever has the higher of the two die wins that round. Whoever has the higher of the two continue that for 3 rounds, and together you make a story about how your two fighters and together you make a story about how your two fighting and punching each other in the face and like who wins and that kind of all that good stuff. It's supposed to be pretty quick and fast and easy to pick up.
It's all those things. I mean, I think you've done a really good job with that as a concept. I'm now scrolling down to our title page so that we can see that I get credit on this one too. So yes, thank you.
Exactly.
Again, we're only sponsoring ourselves. This is a thing we're doing that's all about us. One thing that you did really nice here is you have this very nice flow chart, because something you do very well is speak quickly and get to the point when you're going through things. So I think you just gave everybody the whole game premise right there. No, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm just being constructively mean to you. In going through how the game is set up, I think the really nice thing is you're able to communicate things about the game really quickly. And then this flow chart goes through things in such good detail, because you talked about things like safety tools, you talk about reviewing the rules, getting into the right spirit. Like the idea of having music and establishing a scene and so forth, these are concrete steps in this flow of play. And if I was going to think back to playing like a Street Fighter game on a video game arcade machine, I would think of those as being very, very important components. If you didn't have that, I mean, what would you do?
I mean, yeah, like in Street Fighter, what good is like the game is not nearly as fun if you play it on mute, to be fair.
It's
Like
absolutely true.
you gotta have the level of music to go with it, and like and that interacts with like the sound of the punches and everything. It like makes a whole experience. So like I wanted to kind of reflect that in this game. It's like it's so easy when you're not streaming to just go up on YouTube and pull up let's see, for example, the greatest song ever, Street Fighter Moss by Kamasi Washington.
I mean,
And
honestly,
have that in the
yeah.
background.
Yeah, if you weren't doing all of those things, it would not be the same game.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of which, we could have done some sort of music on here. That's a future note. We could have like a little bit of a background musical sound.
Yeah, some like lo-fi hip hop, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. That's what's the term? Free to
License free.
use. Yeah, and then we'd be okay with that. So that's a future note for us. But so the thing I like about Kitchen Contest, or pardon me, I'm immediately I'm talking about myself again. The thing I like about Closed Fists is the fact that the core of the game, it's so simple to learn and to teach and to play. And then the core of the game is really talking and having that conversation in the game.
Yeah.
Knowing that, unlike Kitchen Contest, you don't know the outcome right away. So you could win or lose. You're going to change that every single round. And you get to keep talking about like how things are going. You have some like special sauce in here where the techniques are all very different. Let me see if I can scroll down here where we can see what some of these techniques are like, because they're super cool. We're going to skip this. We should have been looking at this when we were talking about hyping up and all these. Okay, now I'm going to pause on the picture of the hand because I know you like this very much.
Oh man, I love that fucking picture. That's so fucking epic. I doing this layout, I was not sure. I was still unconfident in this design, and I was super unconfident in this layout. I was like, I don't know. I don't know. Is this worth even doing? And then I saw this picture of the hand. I'm like, fuck yes, no. I can run this game, and I could see two fighters on this goddamn bridge, like walking up to each other slowly, badass music in the background, and then just fighting the hell out of, fighting for their lives, like jumping around on these railings, like lunging at each other and like bounding off of these fingers and like going off the side and rolling down the cliffside. It was such an evocative image, and it just brought everything together. And I love it so much. It's so personal to me because like I am Vietnamese American, and this is apparently a bridge in Vietnam. I had no idea it existed, and I spent like a good hour just looking up the history of this bridge. it's a bridge outside Danang, and I can't remember the exact name of it, like as much as I looked into it. But like that picture is so fucking evocative. Like, look at it. Come on.
I have a lot of questions too, because does his hand have 5 fingers?
I believe it does. I believe it's just the angle of
No,
this
it's great.
specific image.
There is so much going on in this picture. It's really great trying to imagine what's really happening. It's so cool.
And like that fog in the on the lower side, because in other pictures you could clearly see the city of Danang like below, but it's so much more evocative with this mist. Like it seems like it looks like what are they called, the Wudang Mountain in Crouching Tiger Hidden Dragon at the end, but when she just flies in the mist, it seems so evocative of that to me.
So I've been to some of the Chinese mountains like Mount Hua that are big in the martial arts scene, and seeing these images where you get to actually be there and there's like that low valley of mist. I
Mhm.
mean, it is just the coolest thing on earth.
Yeah.
And this bridge, I mean, this is a showstopper. That's an amazing thing. So yeah, it's fun how I think one of the most fun things about coming up with games is how much of it becomes about the shared experience or the thing that you're trying
Mhm.
to share with others. And I think this is a really good example of the picture is exciting enough on its own that you could make a game just based on that idea. Like, those
Yeah.
moments of inspiration, those lightning bolts,
Yeah.
those are good.
Yeah,
Okay,
if Kitchen Contest had not inspired this game, this picture would have. I would have come to
absolutely.
this game eventually.
So let's scroll down here and let's look at these techniques because I think these are really fun. So I know one of my initial criticisms of this game was, what are you going to do with all those techniques? And the first time I read through it, I was like, that's a lot of different stuff to do. And then I actually, we played this. And when I played it,
Mhm.
I was looking through it, I was like, oh man, there's a lot of good choices here. I don't know which one I want. And that's a different kind of like special thing in a game. When you have
Mhm.
too many good choices and you have to pick something.
Yeah, and you get one, and you can only use it once. Like that's all, man. Just picking a baby.
Yeah, yeah. As a person with 2 kids, I know what you mean with that. That doesn't work. So, yeah, right here, there's so many good choices, and they really, really, really impact the game. I mean, especially because you're effectively having 3 dice for a whole game. So
Mhm.
the idea that you can re-roll one, or that you can tell somebody they can't use theirs, or anything like that,
Yeah,
it's just like
or
it's
force them to
so many
reroll one of
ways.
theirs. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it all. So we played this game, and we had a beach setting. I played a very serious Hungar martial artist that was based upon some kung fu people I know, and your character was
She was what are they called? She was like a like
jazzercise.
the jazzercise. Yes, she was like a
Yeah,
jazzercise instructor, like in the unitard and like sort of dancing and like had a super happy synthwave beat for her background music and everything, and it was like bouncing around. Very happy-go-lucky. It was very much a Street Fighter theme with like this serious martial artist and like this young like jovial woman, just like super contrasting, but like it fits, it works.
it was great. It did everything I wanted it to. It was exactly what the game should have been. And now that we're talking about game design here live, what I'm thinking is, have you built the solo engine for this game yet?
I I I mean technically you did, and I just stole it and cut out half of it.
No, no. I mean, like,
I,
have you come up with the formula for how to play this game against yourself or by yourself?
oh, by myself. No, I have not, but I should. I probably should. As much as your solo engine inspired me, that'd probably be the next logical step. I probably should.
Let me pitch it to you one step harder now. Now, imagine you were climbing the Street Fighter World Champion tournament ladder like you do in the arcade game, and you had to populate a bracket and then beat all those
Mhm.
fighters.
That is something I considered. Like I can't remember if I actually put this in the game or not somewhere. I don't think I did. But if I'd thought about doing a bracket, if you did a bracket, everybody rolls a random technique for each of these fighters, and like that is their technique for the whole thing, and you just work down to like the last two. If you like you have a group of four, and like maybe everybody has like 2 fighters each, and like you just roll a technique, and then you make up a fighter for the technique as you go through, just to be real quick about it. I thought
Mm-hmm.
I thought about that, but I didn't consider that for solo. That's super interesting doing it as a solo version. That'd be super cool.
I mean, that could be really fun if you could somehow keep yourself from being surprised.
Yeah, the
No, no, no.
techniques
Keep
kind
yourself
of.
being surprised, I guess is what I mean.
Yeah, maybe if you rolled a random technique as you went through to another fighter, something like that.
Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah.
we're like one step away from perfection here, but it's like
Yeah.
something like that where
Mm.
you do this, maybe you roll all the dice ahead of time and they're all just sitting off there to the side or something like that. Hmm. There's some thoughts here.
Yeah,
It's
there's something
harder
to
with
that. I think
competitive.
it's something we're gonna simmer on though. It's a really good idea though. It's
Yeah.
oh man.
This is the fun thing about having a very loose time limit on a game design talking
Oh yeah,
stream, though, is
of
we can
course.
just like do this, right? I mean, again, we're not
Yeah.
we're not taking time away from anything else. Okay,
Oh
how
yeah.
about this? What if you give yourself two dice to roll each round, and you
Hmm.
color code them, or you do something else to denote them, even if it's just rolling one
Hmm.
and then rolling the other one, and one of them is always your die, and one of them
Hmm.
is your opponent's die,
Hmm.
and so you don't know the answer, but you will roll them each time.
So you're not rolling a pool anymore. You're rolling for every round each time, and you're like sort of making the narrative of in that round. Do you are you able to beat them in that round and progress, or do you get knocked back down on the bracket, and do you
Right.
continue as this character that beats you?
Right. And well, oh, that's another interesting idea. Is continuing now you have to be the other fighter. That's super crazy. Oh
Yeah.
man, now I love that. That's possibly the best idea ever. Oh my gosh. I love that because you could do a chain and then when you yeah, you never have to stop playing.
Yeah, it's not like you have to like get knocked down back down to the ladder. You just shift perspective to the winner of that fight, and like you keep going and see who ends up at the end, and like how like see how they got there, and then maybe you can backtrace a little bit of like the fights that they had leading up to that one where they beat your current character.
You just came up with the secret answer to how this works the best way. You're
Yeah,
right. Because the thing that I was finding in my head that could potentially be defeating about this is what do you do when you lose? You just go back to starting the game over again.
yeah.
That is gold. I love that. Okay, so imagine this. You set yourself up with a bracket that has, let's say, 5 tiers or something like that. Something that's not going to get too complicated. I guess I have to
Yeah.
like see it on a tree to make it make sense. You play starting at the bottom as your like Joe Dirt level fighter who is going to have whatever their power is, but there's no reason to think they're going to win. And then they have to ascend through all these different levels. When you get to the top, you need your like, demon in a like catcher's mask or something like that level, like something big. We need like M Bison. Let's just use the
Or
names right out
what's
there.
his name from Mortal Kombat? Like I will eat your soul, fucking dude. Oh, what the fuck is his
Yeah,
name?
the Akuma guy. Is that what you're thinking of?
No,
Oh, Mortal Kombat. Okay, wait, wait. Uh, I'm sorry.
Soul
Let's.
Stealer comes up. Shang Tsung. That's it.
Okay,
Yeah.
there we go. So yeah, and then I love the idea of switching perspectives. So if you rolled your fighter, and then you roll some random traits of some other fighters, and you try to get up to the pinnacle, man, that could be really cool.
Yeah, some random tables for like traits and like so that you're not like you don't get lost in your own head about like the backgrounds and everything. You do a look and then you do a personality and sort of those sort of tables. So you can make it pretty quick and keep rolling along. That'd be
Yeah,
super great. Yeah.
this would be super cool. So you populate your bracket, you put yourself down at the bottom, and then you work your way up. Maybe for additional fun, you give yourself a scoring table at the bottom for how many rounds your fighter survived and for how many times you win versus lose. When we come up with like a, if you manage to make it all the way up to the top, let's say you got 20 points. 20 points is you are the expert. Like, like we need like a leaderboard. And
Oh, and points determine that character's place in the next bracket for the next year, the next tournament.
oh yes, oh my
Yeah. So
gosh,
that like
this has so
you get a
much
through
juice.
line even like up and across. Like oh that's yeah.
I'm sorry, but these are very, very good ideas you have to do.
Yes. I mean no reason to be sorry. Yeah, and of course you're getting a co-writing credit.
Well, also you need to come up with close fists like colon the tournament, and have that be a separate thing where now you give yourself the chance to publish like a second title. This can't be just an update of
Yeah.
close fists. It has to be like a second, more developed solo game. This is so crazy good because
Yeah, I liked it so much. Like I thought I liked Close Fist. I thought I had done everything I could with Close Fist. I thought it was like not a perfect game, but I thought like I had sort of come full circle on it. But like, oh my, like this just widened the whole perspective. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. The
and
idea
I
of
like.
playing the people who beat you is so good that it makes me want to like spit.
Mhm.
So good.
I don't think I caught that. Like we talked about kitchen contest for like 5 minutes and didn't actually talk about it. We talked about the game, but we didn't discuss anything. And then we just went straight to my stuff. Let's get to some of your stuff.
Okay, well we could do that. That's fine too.
Yeah.
Yeah, do we want to keep talking about kitchen contests or should we move on to something else? By the way,
I
if
think you,
anybody's watching this
yeah.
right now, if you do happen to be watching and or listening to this, I want to say thank you because there's no reason you have to. And this is mostly going to be Nit and I just riffing off each other's ideas for this period of time, which may be up to
Basically
another
just doing
50
what we do
minutes.
in private messages all the time.
This is the live version of our Discord conversations. This is all we do with an occasional like baking slash thing thrown in. By the way, I'm making that bread that you shared, the pre-ferment. I'm making that right
Oh
now in
yeah,
the background, and I'm on like the
nice.
about to separate it into two bowls stage.
Hmm.
So bowls, doesn't matter. Okay, but if you are in chat, what I was going to get at is if you are interested in hearing about the kitchen game, let me know. Otherwise, what I'm probably going to transition over to is talking about dragon riding because I like some of the concepts there, and I don't know if we've talked about them to the point where they make sense to you. Because, my words are obtuse for no reason.
Yeah, you had asked me to look at some stuff, and I had some questions.
That's generally how we do things. And I think I took all of your notes and immediately went, yep, that's a good point. I shouldn't just copy
Mhm.
paste from my old document over and over again. Um,
I mean, who's not guilty of that, though? To be fair.
okay, and Jess says she wants to hear about dragon riding. And honestly, I'm very okay with that. Let's do some
Yeah.
things. I have to figure out how to do my transitiony things. So number one, where's the window I want to go to? That's good. Okay, here's my shared window. I'm gonna get the browser capture up and lose the Adobe capture. Dragon riding is going to look real pretty. For some reason, there's some sort of overlapping thing, which I hope goes away in a second. Okay, that looks all right. Let's see how this all goes. And do a transition. Okay, in a second, we'll see how good it actually looks live. Yeah, good. Okay, so I did a game a little while ago called Dragon Riding is Easy, Isn't It? And the concept was to teach a really lightweight rule set. The direct inspiration from it was Ghost slash Echo, which is in turn inspired by Psy Run. And in between the word Psy, which is spelled like the Greek letter, and Run, there's an asterisk. So I'm going to type it in chat in case anybody ever needs to look for it. It's a Miggy Baker game. I have no idea how she actually says her name, but I'm going to do that. Um, and Run is really cool, and so is Ghost Echo, and so is Dragon Riding, because they ask you to roll two dice and position a goal and a risk, so you can choose if you're going to do really good or really bad on your actual goal, and then you also get to choose the same thing with your risk. So when you have all of those things working out, it's kind of nice. I'm going to have a dog bark. Okay, nope, he tricked me. So, we're talking about dogs. Nope. We're talking about, what's the term? The game.
Dogs, dragons, same difference, right?
Today, yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my chat's not caught up, so I was going to say hi to Fernando, but I can't. So, long story short, hi, Fernando. Um, what I was getting at, dragon riding. So, I did thank you. That's where I was going for. But with dragon riding, it was a really simple rule set, and I immediately found problems when I was trying to run it. In the fact that I communicated just enough information to tell people what they were supposed to do, but not enough to make the things they were supposed to do interesting. So you roll dice, you figure out if you have a good outcome or a bad outcome. That's every game
Hmm.
on Earth. Big deal. Why would that actually matter? So I started looking at it more, and I came up with some things that I really like. One of the things I like about dragon riding, excuse this very fast page skip as I jump ahead on my bookmarks, is the idea of having a rival. So one of the players in the game, which is determined by how many points you have in your bad energy pool called losses, has to be the rival. And one of my goals in designing the game was that would be fluid. So you don't have a game master. One of your co-players is always going to be making things worse for you and for themselves if they want to, because honestly, that's how I play it. And then with knowing that's the way the game works, you're trying to spend down that pool and stop being the rival so you don't have to be the bad guy anymore and you can let somebody else have a turn. So I had all these concepts in play, and when I actually ran it with people, it worked okay because they were creative, but without that guidance of somebody who actually knew what the game was, it wouldn't have worked really well. So then I started focusing on another concept which was important, which was the playset. And that was the idea that there's a a background. This is not something I've come up with by myself. It's in Apocalypse World. It's in a lot of other games. I've seen some Twitter posts where I wish I had linked to them and like used them as some sort of design credit, where they talk about like the toyetic nature of a set. Like in D&D, I would say that Descent to Avernus is probably the most toyetic and playset focused of the adventures, followed by probably Curse of Strahd, because they're not really a singular narrative. Well, they're a very singular narrative. They're very self-contained, and they contain new things that you wouldn't necessarily want to just put in your regular D&D stuff because it might get Mad Max and Dracula all over your normal, easy fantasy role playing. So the dragon riding playset that I'm coming up with here, this is Dragon Riding the Launch, which is the name of the dragon riding flight school. And so now with that as like a background, you have to navigate a race course. And the idea is this is like the qualifier to leave academy and get your final rubber stamp that you're now an official dragon rider, which I think is a fun background. Um, and then the second part of it is you're not planning on winning right away. You don't have to immediately beat this level. If you don't, nothing bad is going to happen. Just your character has not yet ascended to the rank of full dragon rider. And honestly, like there's supposed to be five merit stamps. You start with one, so you've got four more you've got to get. So it should be impossible for you to complete the playset your first play. And I like that. So basically, the idea is try to give a very focused framework so that people can interact with it the way they want, but also it's simple to understand where the goals and risks and so forth come in the dice rolling. It was a long description.
I think one thing that really stuck out to me, especially at the end, like specifically with this playset with the launch, it your fiction and your mechanics really do gel well because you mentioned like it's likely you're not going to pass this on the first test, and like you being in academy or like you still being in academy, it's about learning, and like so the first time you do it, you learn what the course is. The second time you do it, you know a little bit better, and like you just kind of every time you learn a little bit more about both this course and the system and things like that. So it and in sort of as you're growing mechanically, you're getting better and more likely to succeed through this playset, which it really works with the fiction and the mechanics, like how they gel really well in that way. That's really cool.
Yeah, thank you. That was one of the big things I wanted was like my goal, if Dragon Riding was going to be a series of games, I want a
Mm-hmm.
starter set. I want a
Yeah.
first base. And with that, I want to make sure that it has a reason that it makes sense. Like you'd want to have a reason you would revisit it. And I feel like that's
Mm-hmm.
something where it's easy to fall short in a game. Like I don't want to go through the D&D starter box at one time and know where all the locations are and where all the treasures are and stuff like that. That's fun and
Mm-hmm.
that's fine. I mean, in the same way you could say this is a game where there is a race and you have to go from the front to the back and then you're done.
Yeah.
But there's a couple other things you can do. Number one is if you end up being the rival and now you're the loser, you're the bad guy, you can make other people have a harder time. Those other people could be yourself, but you can activate a bad feature. You can make something happen where I'm calling them hazards, where like a race course starts having a rock slide, and then you've got to go through the rocks on your dragon and so forth. Or if you get sixes on dice, okay, so bad stuff comes from getting ones, good stuff comes from
Mm-hmm.
getting sixes.
Mm-hmm.
If you get those sixes, then you can activate a fun thing that you can do. And the one that I think I am leaning into the hardest for being fun is you can decide that after the closing ceremonies, there's going to be a social dance, like, or things like that. The kind of things that are absolutely needless to the play of the game, but that players will want.
Yeah, of
Because
course.
it's not, I mean, who's going to win the game? It's not about winning the game by being the first rider. If your only goal in playing this game was to immediately complete the race course and get to the like five stamps and I'm done as soon as possible, I think that is valid. But I also think you will have a suboptimal experience playing the game. You would be
Because
much
like
better off playing another
congratulations,
game.
you got to the end. All the rest of us are like back here having a lot more fun at the dance and like sort of arguing with the rivals and like sort of dodging all these hazards. Like yes, you won the trophy, but we're having the better time.
Also, thank you, because now that I've said that out loud, I realize how I sound talking to myself from high school. And it's like, oh no, I'm judging myself in such a harsh way for the thing that I did. And now it's like, well, dang. Getting to the end of high school as quickly as possible and completing all the things before anybody else actually doesn't sound that much fun now. Dang it.
I mean, to be fair, like some of us are culturally uh, lenient towards that sort of behavior, and I'm very familiar with that as well, having not gone to my having graduated and not gone to my prom and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, so my final year of high school took a very sharp detour, and I was not allowed to go to my prom or several other social activities. But that is a different story that is not for this particular stream. That's people will have to
I
like and
didn't realize
subscribe
you were
before
the
they hear that.
rival, Hans. I thought
Oh
you were the
man,
hero.
yeah, year four of high school. It's like everything was going good up until like the last month, and then all of my carefully laid plans fell apart. It was very interesting to hear as a story when it's not about you.
Yeah, forget all this design stuff. Who cares? I want to
That's
hear the
right.
story.
That's right, right? No,
That's what this show is now.
it was really good. No, honestly, it's very funny because that's also a time in my life where I was playing a lot of role playing games.
Mhm.
And I can say that if I had not started playing role playing games, I would have had a very boring, middle of the path trajectory towards getting into college and doing nothing exciting with anything.
Mhm.
And thanks to playing role playing games, and more importantly, thanks to the fact that I actually started to care about what I was doing and where I was going, I have done a lot of stuff that was a lot of fun.
That's super cool to hear. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think.
Jess, yeah, it's not good. You don't want to hear about high school Hans. It's not good. So
Yeah, High School Hans does sound like an RPG character.
he really does. There were choices made, and especially senior year Hans had some choices made. But again, I'm not going to go back on it now. It's done. I had fun. I learned a lot of lessons. It was good. So where were we on? So winning a game is cool. Everybody likes the idea of winning a game. I think that
Yeah.
winning a game is something that should be able to happen and that is no way something that you should discourage. But I like offering side quests, optional narratives, things that are fun. And if you think about it, most of the time, if you're playing a book adventure or anything like that, you're going to spend most of your time riffing off your friends for their cool ideas, if you're doing it right. And
Mhm.
yes, we're being judgmental here now. So, in terms of looking at the launch, the idea that I had was okay, if you roll a six, you're going to get a victory. That's what I'm calling that getting a six, having a narrative token kind of thing. And when I looked at the game system a couple more times, I realized the dice are already letting you decide what happens. You don't need more juice in that regard. You don't need more stuff to make your rolls easier or anything like that. Let's give the player a token. And let them sit there and collect those tokens and use them for something fun. Like maybe you want to go see the Dragon Nursery. Let's see, is that actually there yet? I think we're a little farther down here. Let's go down to features.
Yeah, under features.
Yeah, yeah. I think on the screen we could only see up to the tab right before that. Maybe you want to go see the Dragon Nursery and you want to go like see baby dragons and feed them. That's cool. I like that. I would go there personally. Maybe you want to take a rest break. Maybe you want like a official timeout in your race, and everybody's going to sit down and they're going to drink a Coke and they're going to just like hang out. Um, if I was racing all the other Dragon Riders and I wanted to like throw some heat at them, I would want everybody to have to stop what they're doing and take a break and talk for a little while, and then you could throw some trash talk in there. It could be a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
fun.
of course.
Other stuff. You could have a flight instructor take a hands-on approach. Maybe you're the kind of person who likes that like mentor scene. And if you want to have that, sure, activate it. Have something fun happen. So all these like activatable features. So you can say, here is optional play. But when you're the player at the table, you can say that is something I want to experience, and it gives you a chance to do that without it feeling really heavy-handed. I like an optional sub menu to this game. And then
Yeah, I was not familiar with the idea of playsets before I had seen your when you shared this with me, and it's super cool. It's like almost a sandbox light, but like modular somewhere between there. It's not like a linear adventure or anything like that. There is definitely a linear path there, but like there's so many like things to like plug and play. That seems so cool. It's not a proper sandbox where it's like you got to like this thing is planted here and it's like set. It's like no, like this is a thing. This is a tool from the. This is a toy from the playbox, and like you bust it out and play with it and like see how it busts in with the other toys and like you make up fiction. It's like the idea of playsets is really cool. I had not encountered those before, and I'd love to like look at more information on those and see other in other games. Like
bless
you had
you.
mentioned, some of the official adventures were like that, and I'm not super familiar with those adventures, but I'm gonna maybe take a look with that new lens.
Jess says bless you too. So yeah, I mean, I think that's. By the way, Jess, thank you. I did pass that on to my wife. So when we talk about like a playset, so I think of like a Descent to Avernus. I don't know what the narrative hook is there off the top of my head, like how you get to Avernus. I think you do something bad and you're just there. Um, Playsets that I've seen, I want to say that Apocalypse World has these. I could be wrong. A lot of the Powered by the Apocalypse games have them. Masks, I know, has a whole book of like two or three different subsettings that you can get into where you're playing like different comic book universes or different like, you know, like the Crisis on Infinite Earths kind of thing
Yeah.
or something like that. So some games lend themselves to it very well, and I
Mhm.
think that's cool. I think it's nice to think, okay, I learned a rule set, and now I've got something I can do with it. But if I want to make it something different, the rules are all always the same. Um,
Mhm.
I think that's probably the thing where if somebody says you can do anything in Dungeons and Dragons, I would say, yeah, obviously you can, and that's not a bad thing, because if
Yeah.
you know it and you want to hack it and make it do something else cool, I
Yeah.
think the rest of us are all just sitting around there going, but I have this idea, and here's my idea, and here's why you might want to use it. And I mean, I'm not going to say no to that because that's all I do all day.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like having a core engine and then having all like that like hacks or something like that. But like where how there's like Powered by the Apocalypse, and then there's like Dungeon World, all these things like that like sort of use that same engine and like do different like sort of some fiction with it. And like this seems almost like that to me, where it's like it you instead of having a whole another system, you have like this different fictional setting. You have this adventure that all fit on top of this ground base layer that is
Yeah.
the core rules of dragon writing, which is super neat.
Yeah, I mean you're right, and that's in no way my idea or anything like that. That's definitely something
Yeah.
I've stolen. But that's the fun part is when you don't have to relearn a rule system, it gives you
Mhm.
more time to play the game. I have been the guy where I will run 5 games in 5 weekends. It's been way more than that sometimes, but I'm going to be conservative right now. And I will run 5 different games, sometimes with the same people, making them learn each game as we go through, including the setting elements. And it is generally not fun for anybody except me because they're all trying to figure out what the game is. And I'm like, look, I already told you the rules. It goes like this, do the thing. Um, so I'm not known for my patience in running games all the time, that's for sure.
I mean that's fair. Like as much as many gripes as I have with fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons, I still like it a lot. But I have gripes. But it is like it is the game. It is the one that like if people are playing games, it is most likely
Are you
that is
kidding
the
me,
one that
Suze?
they
That's
can pick
fair.
up and play and not have to think too hard about the rules and like learn the whole new system. So like if you wanted to do a pickup game, that's gonna be the best chances. So like, it's fair that like it's
Kobe.
there is a lot to be said for like learning a new game, and that does a very specific thing very well. But there's also something to be said about just being able knowing the rules and just kind of getting to it, getting to the fun stuff.
So I want to point out for those who don't like dogs barking on stream, I've increased the barking during this part of the stream by 300%. We're really bringing some like dimensional sound to what we're doing right now. I can't do much about that. So thank you all for enjoying these dogs. They are having so much going on in the background. They're having their own fun. I will occasionally mute, but honestly, if I want to talk at all, it's all dog barks. So, Kevin, if you don't mind, I'm going to go back because Fernando in chat was talking about the playset. I figure we can go over that
Oh, yeah.
again. So,
Yeah.
just as a general term, which we've kind of talked about, but maybe not in a way that makes sense to everyone,
Okay.
we have a basic game, and that has a set of rules that we all understand. And then our playset is the idea that there's a setting which is separate from those rules so that we can continue to interact with the same rule set. For example, Dungeons and Dragons. We could be in Eberron, we could be in the Forgotten Realms, we could be in Barovia, and we'll know what the rules are, but then there are different things we interact with each one. And we don't necessarily expect them to cross. They can, and that's not bad, but each of these playsets offers something different, and we might have a different play experience. So, yep, Jess is right. Girl by Moonlight. I've taken a very tiny look at that, and that has some very cool playsets to it because that's talking about magical girls. So you've got like a Sailor Moon type one, and there would be another example I would use right here, but honestly, I'm just failing to name a property off the top of my head.
I think there's also what's it called? Madoka Magical Girl. I can never remember the title
Okay.
of that one. I've heard very good things about Girl by Moonlight, and I've been wanting to take a look at it.
Yeah. Okay. So Jess says you're right. There's a Madoka. So
Yes.
yeah. Oh, and mech suit. Nice. So there's a lot of different stuff you can do there. Yeah. So Fernando, you got
I'm
a
just gonna
great idea
play
right there.
some
That's
mech
the
suit
example.
Magical Girls right now. Like, forget all this. Let's hear stories about Hans's high school life, and then like just jump straight into some magical girl play instead of doing the thing that we said we would do.
That's right. That's so right. Yeah. So Fernando's got it right. Thinking about Dragonlance and Eberron as being separate play sets for D&D, that's exactly right. So playset is another way of saying like a campaign setting, depending on what you're doing. I think a lot of people think of playsets as being more rules light and more. I lost my train of thought. They go into a lot of these more rules light, like Powered by the Apocalypse type games. And the barking. This is a new dog that's been invited over to have a dog play date. And so we usually like to pair our dog play dates with our streaming sessions to make sure that we get as much barking on camera as possible. Okay, that's all the fun stuff I have for that. So yeah, we've got a lot of good playsets. We should be playing Girl by Moonlight. I should be avoiding the high school Hans questions as often as possible. And let's see. Let's go back to talking about some knit stuff. What have you got that you want to talk about? We talked about closed fists. Sharps.
Sharps, yeah, Sharps is a game I made. I guess I finished the 1.0 version like 6 months ago, and then I decided that I would never look at it again, and we decided to do this. And it's the
Yeah.
one doc that I have that's presentable.
Yeah, I'm going to take a look. I think I've got Sharps as a shared doc to me. So give me a second here.
Mhm. And specifically for Sharps, like the thing that's probably hung up me the
I've got a
most is the dice
1.2. Does that sound right?
thing. Yes,
Okay,
1.2.
cool, cool, cool.
Yep, I see on there. It's an anonymous Aurochs. Looks like a
Could be
wolf.
me.
Yeah, and like I think the dice system is the one thing that like really got me to want to make this game, because I wanted a game that had gradual success, like
Uh-huh.
Powered by Apocalypse, by like Blaze in the Dark, where like there's fails, there's success with the cost, and then there's success. But I wanted that, but I wanted to roll a lot of dice because I like rolling a lot of dice. I like throwing 12d6 all at once, and I came up with this I guess half baked dice system still, and like you're it's where you're always going to roll at least 1d6, and you're trying to get let me see, it's been a while. Let me just straight up roll this. Based on the context of the scene, the actions proposed by the mod or the GM sets a bar, or DC as it would be called in other games, from 1 to 5. 1 being trivial, 5 being unlikely chances. A bar 3, or DC 3 as it would be called in another game, is average or standard difficulty. The player and the mod work together to determine what stats, skills, and ken, which is our like wises, like your different knowledge sets and things like that, would be relevant to the context and the action. Determine the number of dice to be rolled. Player rolls 1d6 plus X being the number of relevant stats, skills, kens, agreed by the player and the mod, and things like that. And like you're getting stats and skills and kens like through play, like through learning things and sort of that stuff. So like a skill would be like stealth, or a skill would be like lock picking, or a skill would be that kind of stuff. And ken would be like I have ken of local crime, I have ken of sort of security and things like that. And you would just combine all these things, and you would have, hopefully you would have like about 3d6, and then you want to have, let me see, what are successes? Dies that land on 6 are boons or crits, and they count as a full success and get you some. And dies that are 4 to 5 are partial successes. Dies that land 2 to 3 are failures. Die that land R1s are banes and count as failures. And then you're kind of just stacking up and trying to find the sum, balancing out your successes, failures, and things like that. I think it's been a while, to be fair. This probably wasn't the best thing to bring for a stream to show the public,
Hey, no,
show
no.
other people.
Sometimes that's how it goes. You know, sometimes
Yeah,
ideas are both harder and better once you actually have to explain them to someone else.
yeah. Let's see. Once the die are rolled, compare the number of successes to the given bar, your successes and failures, and hopefully you do have more successes than failures. And if you meet the bar, the check is successful or successful at a cost. If you do not, then you are unsuccessful, and you deal with the consequences of that. Successes and failures cancel each other out. Advantages and disadvantages cancel each other out. Boons and banes cancel each other out. So like you're trying to you're taking this pool of dice that you roll, matching up the your successes and your failures of various degrees, and then finding out what's left. And hopefully, what's left are successes.
Yeah. Okay, so to stop you talking about yourself and talk about myself for a second, of
Yeah.
course, for 2 seconds. One thing is, I like this as a general concept for dice rolls. I mean, it's again pretty much the same kind of thing I'm doing with dragon riding. Like, you've got that range from 1 to 6. That's a very
Yeah.
common thing. I love the
Yeah.
dogs. Number two, bark, bark, bark. Number two, when you're dealing with things like this, like rolling a big handful of dice can be really satisfying. And
Yeah.
then like canceling stuff out, that's something I like in like the Genesis slash Star Wars games. I
Mhm.
like the canceling out. That's somewhat satisfying to see things get easier or harder. But also right here, like there's that, like a game I'm thinking of right now is Shadowrun. Have you ever tried to play Shadowrun or successfully played Shadowrun?
I have not. I've been dissuaded from such by some horror stories of Shadowrun.
Probably me amongst others, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
want to play it in person versus online. Like Roll20 would be great for this, because when you
Mhm.
have to roll 30 dice in a pool to handle something in the background, my mind immediately makes that a not fun play experience. Yours, where you're
Fair.
saying like you're expecting like 3 dice, that's real doable.
Like 3 to 6, and 6 is like when you're getting up and like sort of experience in the game and things like that, and you're getting a lot of skills. Like the longer you play, the more skills you get, and then the more skills you have, the more it'll apply to things, and sort of that's how it like sort of builds. Because it's kind of a levelless system. It's level-less, and it might end up being classless, but like currently it's levelless, and like your experience is just determined by the number of skills you have, and like how, and by having more skills, you can more broadly get more dice on more wider range of topics, and like be better in that
Yeah,
sort of way.
yeah, and I mean it's a good formula. So I'm in no way picking on that because there are a lot of games,
Oh yeah,
including the ones we've already discussed, they all
yeah.
work on this general formula. So that's a cool thing. I really like six-sided dice because the fewer barriers to people playing a game, the better.
Exactly.
I love online dice rollers. I love the cheap dice that you already have in your Monopoly box.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like stuff that's customized for a particular game
No,
unless you
Genesis.
really want that. Yeah, Genesis, Invisible Sun, I mean, you name it. There are some games where they have some really cool pieces that are very evocative, and that is great. But I also want the game where you can just put down a sheet of lined paper, if that, or open up a text document on your phone, because honestly, I almost never write anything down on a physical piece of paper anymore if I can help it. And you roll some dice, you come up with some numbers. I like that about a game. So,
Yeah, and like it's D6s was a very very deliberate decision, because if I'm going to have a game where you roll a lot of dice, and the dice that get sold in like sort of bulk, like you get the brick of what's it, like 36 D6s, like that's a lot more reasonable to ask somebody to invest in for this game than to go out and buy 12 polyhedral sets for 12 to have 12 D12s,
hmm
where like they don't sell those in like packs of like 10 or anything. Like that was just a very it was a as much as I love like non-D6 dice, like that was like sort of the consent. If I'm going to have somebody roll a lot of dice, it's got to be a dice that somebody can get easily get a lot of.
right, right. I totally agree. I mean, that's the
Especially
big
since I'm
thing.
not manufacturing my own dice as much as I would like to.
Right. That would be a totally different question, right? Is when you want to make them a lot of money
Yeah,
by selling people dice.
yeah.
So, I mean, again, this is something you've worked into. You've worked a lot of effort into. You've done a good job of polishing this up to the point where you've answered most of the questions you would have design wise, right? I did something really similar to this with the current thing I'm working on, which I'm calling Clash, and that's my
Mhm.
Final Fantasy clone. And if you don't mind, I'm going to be terrible and kind of like show you what I've got just so we can examine topics. I don't know if you have a
No,
link to that,
please.
but I
Yeah.
can share you one in chat here on Zoom. So
It's
I,
been a bit since I looked at Clash, and
hopefully
I
it'll get you
liked it
in here.
before. I'm sure I'll look at it again.
Let me just make sure I can give you a link you can actually view. If that one doesn't work, this one should. But okay, so we're talking about Clash. Now, the only reason I wanted to talk about myself more and the things that I'm doing more here is
No,
I
please.
came up with kind of a similar idea for this first part, and I'm going to scroll down so we can see that, which is in this how to play section here. There's the idea of ratings. I got really
Mhm.
obsessed recently because of Fire Emblem, but this is in a lot of Japanese games with the idea of the ranking system. The like S class, A class, B class, C class. I have a very large desire to make that thing work in the game world. And in my mind, it always comes down to being a percentile system. But I
Mhm.
hate just the like roll under a number on a D100. Like that is
Mhm.
about as uninteresting as something can come for me. So what are we going to do with that? So the idea I
Mhm.
had here is currently you've got this idea of having a rank, which is some letter. So let's say you're like a C class rank person.
Yep.
Then you've got a passive rating of 70 in a skill. Sounds good, except everybody else can have a 72. So it's like, you're probably going to be right on the same bar as somebody who's similar. And then if you want to see if you're doing a good job on a roll, you get to roll your active rating and do an active test. You're going to add 4 dice, or you're going to roll a total of 4 dice. And anything that comes up 4, 5, 6, you get to add 10% to your rating. So your 70 is actually somewhere between 70 and 110. That's it. That's my
Mhm.
entire thing I wanted to talk about with this particular dice rolling thing. In other words, I totally subscribe to the roll a whole bunch of dice and make
Oh, yeah.
it, uh, figure out what that answer is from there. And it solved a design problem for me I was having with this game, which is how do you tell two people who have the same rating apart? Like, what's the
Mhm.
point of rolling anything at that point? And
Yeah.
I didn't like just rolling the percentile dice and trying to have a number that's lower than your score but higher than your opponent's score or things like that. I was trying to figure out like where is that going to be fun.
Mhm.
And so I
Yeah,
figured
because then
out,
like you might as well be rolling a d20, and, like with the DC at that point. It's like that's fine, but it's not super evocative, especially when you do have these ranks and things like that, where it does like where there's a sort of a measurable difference in skill, and like having this where the better you are, literally the more dice you get to roll. Like that's so evocative, and like you literally feel the weight in your hand of how good you are, and when you're as you're rolling these dice, which is that's super. Yeah, it's really good design. I think it is anyway.
well, so we can agree that it is fun to roll a big handful of dice. And even
Yes,
virtually,
yes.
even if you have to use like your roll 20 dice roller, which by the way, again, I love roll 20, I love the roll 20 dice roller. If you get to roll 10 dice, I mean, that is way more interesting and fun than rolling one die. So I mean,
Yeah.
this is a constant in the world. These are good things.
I mean,
So
D20 Roll20 does have like what's it the digital dice that roll on the table as well. So that is in these days it is a compromise that a lot of us have to make, but it's still a lot more fun than just rolling the one D20.
yeah, right,
Like having
right.
seeing all those dice just spread out everywhere. It's all that chaos and all that not much math, but a little bit of math is fun.
The other thing I don't like is I don't like the swinginess of your basic D&D 5e system, especially because I get to listen to a lot of podcasts and I get to hear a lot of people describe very cool things they're doing, and then they roll like a 7. And it's not bad, but it doesn't do anything good. And there's this wide gulf that happens in the D20 system that I'm not a fan of.
Yeah, because in
So,
D&D, like it doesn't matter if you don't hit the DC 12, like it doesn't matter, you failed. There's
yeah.
no like by the rules, there's no like gradual success, there's no advantage, there's the thing. It's like no, you failed, go home, like get fucked.
Right,
Whereas
right.
like in other games with gradual success, at least in the mechanics, it's there that if you roll, you don't necessarily succeed, but you do get something out of it, and it's there. It's like everybody agreed and everybody bought into that. That is how we are going to proceed. That is how the fiction is going to go. That like there's always some success if you haven't just totally whiffed it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that pretty much every other system that's been made from, let's say, the year 2000 on has captured the idea of what happens when you get partway better. All the
Mhm.
Powered by the Apocalypse games have a better idea. I mean, pretty much, it's hard to do worse than that. So we want to have some kind of outcome. We want to do more than just pass the perspective on to the next person on the table while they make the same test to see if they did better.
Yeah.
So something else that I did, which is very similar to what you did in this, is when you're doing an active test, there's the idea that you have to count up your ones and your sixes.
Mhm.
Sixes are good, and then ones are bad,
Mhm.
and we're going to cancel those out.
Yep.
If you end up with positive sixes, you're going to add. I really want to see a limit break in a game. I want to see a limit break. I want it to be exciting. I don't want to do a lot of math over and over again or things like that, but I want a game with a limit break. I am committed to that being something I produce someday. So with this, the idea is we're going to count up this like limit energy on your dice as you get these sixes, and you will eventually get your limit break. Um, I think again, I think of it as being like the advantages, disadvantages from the Star Wars slash Genesis system dice rolling, but hopefully not as swingy and unusual. So these are side effects where you'll still have a positive or a negative
Mhm,
result.
mhm.
You're not going to be asking yourself, well, I got 0 successes, but I got 4 advantages. What do I get to buy with that? Hopefully. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, we've all got our like narrative hangups on games that we like or don't like, right? So that's been one for
I think
me.
it's really key that that we both sort of settled on that we are going to roll a lot of these dice, but it's not necessarily a lot of math. It's more like we're matching ones and sixes, and then we're like putting those aside and we're seeing what's left. So you get the fun of rolling the dice, but you're not like adding up the results of 12d6. You're not actually doing
Yeah,
math. You're just like sort of doing canceling, mix and matching sort of deal, which is
exactly.
sort of so you're not hung up too much on like busting out the calculator or anything. It's like it's relatively a lot quicker, but you still get that satisfaction.
Yeah. Another thing that I was really committed to with Clash is again, if we go back to this example like the C rank, you've got
Mm-hmm.
a passive rating of 70. So no matter
Mm-hmm.
what, your skill is higher than somebody who has never done this before, period. And it never goes down. You never suffer
Yeah.
negative modifiers because of the dice you roll. You might get a negative modifier based on conditions that you're going to have explained to you, but
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to see yourself suddenly being the worst guy at this skill when
Yeah.
you have a noticeable, like, trained rank in this skill.
Yeah.
And I think that's important because I don't like that in games when I suddenly become the worst at something that I know that I have put a lot of effort into, either in my
Mm-hmm.
character creation process or in building a character. It's no fun when you're suddenly just bad at stuff.
Yeah. Like if you're like let's use D&D. If you're the wizard and you're supposed to be the arcane sort of expert in the party, and you whiff your roll, and then the barbarian says, "Oh, like I grew up in this area. I met a wizard once. Let me roll on it," and then they roll a 20. Like it's neat for the barbarian, but it fucking sucks for the wizard because like that's it. There's like there should be some niche protection there as much as I feel like everybody should be able to do everything, but there should be like a special area of expertise because like the wizard can't suddenly just go into a rage, but for some reason the barbarian can suddenly know this weird arcane knowledge, and like that is all on the DM, but it's partially on the DM, but also it's in the mechanics there that like anybody can roll anything, and like so like
Right.
having the ranks to support that helps, and like again like everybody buys in. These are the agreed rules. Like we are all accepting this is the default. That like I will always be better than the random zero across the board commoner.
You're saying something really important here, which is when we start a game, we need to know what the buy-in is.
Mm,
Um, Having played a few games and like done a few things with people now, that's really one of those things like it's tough to communicate all of your expectations in a game before the game. I don't know if
yeah,
you've ever gotten the manifesto from a GM where it's like 50 pages of 10-point font and it's all of the optional rules and stuff you're supposed to agree to. That's not
I
fun.
mean I've been that GM too. To
I
be
know, I
fair,
know. I've been that guy too, where you're like, well, but on the other hand, I do want to make sure that you understand that these are all the things that I think are very important. And I do think there's like a middle ground between manifesto and
Mhm.
rule book.
Yeah, it's called making your own game.
That's very true. That's very true. That's why we have this stream right now.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
if you don't mind, I'm going to diverge from this because I
Mhm.
really want to answer Fernando's question in chat, which is how would we do a limit break? Oh, this is all I ever wanted to talk about in my life. Okay, so
Okay, so I explain limit breaks because I know of the term, but I have never played a Final Fantasy, so I do not know exactly
I am
what you're
judging
referring
you
to. I,
so
I,
hard right
I have a
now.
guess. I know. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
I just played the Final Fantasy VII remake demo. I
Mhm.
saw Final Fantasy VII remake. I was like, I have mixed feelings about it. I
Mhm.
played the demo. They did so good. I am so angry. I will buy that game at some point, but it's not right now, right this second. But like, I mean, I'm so angry. And also, limit breaks are very cool. So the idea is, let's say that I'm being this C ranked. I scrolled too soon. I got excited. I'm going to be the C ranked character where I've got a 70 and I'm rolling 4 dice. I'm going to roll 4 dice. They're all going to be sixes because I have magic dice or I cheat. Either way, I'm good. But they're all going to be sixes, and I got 4 limit energy. Now, if I get to, by what I've written down in this very preliminary document, I'm going to go down here to limits. If I have 5 limit energy, I have a full limit meter. Did I even write that in this part? Okay, here we go. Limit break, 1 full limit bar, 5 energy. So I have somehow in my life rolled 5 dice that have come up as being a limit energy contributors. And now that I've got those dice, I'm going to use them to perform a limit break. And now I'm going to skip way down here to where I have abilities. And this is how much I've written on the subject. I've got a melee attack ability. I've got Omni attack here, which is written as limit 1. It's going to do a ton of damage. It's going to be super cool. That's all I figured out right now. But the idea is that when you use a limit break, you were saying, I'm using all of the energy in this pool. It's all going to go away after this. I no longer have any cool stuff energy.
Okay.
So we go from 0, we've built up to 100, and I'm going to use all 100% for the super awesome attack. It's just like every Street Fighter game too, where you build up the bar at the bottom, and then you
Okay, I
explode.
understand. Yeah.
So that's the limit break. Now, on the other hand, if I scroll back to where I was on limit energy, if I wanted to say roll more dice, or use an ability, just like a regular ability, that's like 1 limit energy. So this is the idea that there's a reason to letting it build all the way up so that I can have
Yeah.
that like super ultimate attack.
Mhm.
I gotta do that in a game.
It sounds super cool. Like, and I love that that's a currency that you spend, but it also like sort of comes. I love different currency systems.
Mm-hmm.
I am the one person in the goddamn entire world that loves tracking ammo in D and D. And like, if I shoot an arrow, I know I shot one less arrow, and like I mark it down on my sheet. I love that stuff. I love the sort of nitpicky and like sort of the greeblies and all that stuff. And like this really speaks to me. We're like, you have this currency. It's like, and it's a gamble. Like, do I want to use it now, or do I like, what if the big boss like busts through the wall like Kool-Aid Man, and like suddenly I need it for that, but I wasted it on this mini boss? Like, who knows? And like that tension and drama is so good. Like, I find it super interesting.
Yeah, that's something that I like in game systems. I like to know that when I made a choice, it was either a good choice or a bad choice. I like to have that
Mhm.
fun with it, and I like the idea of there being a tactical payoff to a combat. I'm very dissatisfied with 5e because my current opinion is the best thing you can do in the game is to use the biggest ability you have. Hey, Jess. Oh my gosh, that's way too many people. We don't know what to do with 21 people. We're talking about limit breaks in a Final Fantasy VII clone RPG. This cannot possibly be interesting to 27 people, but we are very appreciative of you coming on. So,
Suddenly so glad we're not looking at my game.
yeah, I guess. So, what were we talking about? We were on this concept of doing things and having it be interesting. Right, narrative spends. Okay,
Yeah.
so D&D 5e, I'm very upset that my personal opinion is if you get into a big boss combat, you should immediately do your very biggest spells as hard as you can, very first round. And if they survive to round 2, you did it wrong. Because I think that's how every 5e combat I've ever seen works.
Because 5B, it's like, this is a line that everybody says, but look, if you have more actions, you are going to win. And like, regardless of like legendary actions and minions and things like that, it's like you're basically almost always going to have more actions, because the DM most likely does not want to run like 30 minions and a creature with like 27 legendary actions and things like that. Because 5e, I am also dissatisfied with 5e combat because it's such a pain in the ass to run like spellcasters and all this shit. So I default to like bandits, because like it's really easy to run a bandit who just hacks at you and moves along.
Yeah, yeah. Now, with this, I would like there to be an exciting combat where I can run a whole bunch of spellcasters and like bury people in meteors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I gotta admit, as much as I am always the game master when I play games, it's not always true. I get to play a lot of games nowadays, but I feel like the perpetual game master. Despite the fact that I feel like I'm in that role, I am much more interested in designing the player side of the game. And I want to
Mhm.
know that when you're playing the game and things are going okay, that you can have your player make choices. And sometimes they'll be good and sometimes they'll be bad, but they will be meaningful and they will make them
Mhm.
feel like in that round they did something fun. That would be the
Yeah.
ultimate thing. I don't think you're ever going to get that 100% of the time. And it's definitely going to be like your mileage may vary. But if
Mhm.
I was going to have an attack in a game, so here with like this limit break idea, imagine you're always taking the preferred actions for your character type so that you can get that juice so that you can go do your gigantic attack and it will just
Mhm.
evaporate your enemy. On the other hand, you could just be making basic attacks every round and maybe just like using one of your cool abilities and just like
Mhm.
staying the course. And I
Yeah.
think they should both be kind of fun options. I
Because
feel
then
like
even if you are just doing the basic attack, at least you're banking your your what's it called, your limit energy for later in case, like, so that you do have that satisfaction, like you do feel secure. Like I am very much I am the Fallout player that always finds like the nukes and never uses them till the end of the game, because I always want to, I feel secure knowing that I have five, and I have just in case, but I'll die before I use those fucking things, and I will save scum and I will restart if I accidentally shoot one off. I'm that person.
Okay,
So
I'm
yeah,
that
like
person too, so I know how you feel. Or like again, if we're going to talk about like a Final Fantasy game, you've got like the super potion that will heal you and give you back all your magic points. I will never ever use that item ever in the
yeah,
entire game, and I'll be in the final boss combat, and you are going to have to make me use that item. Yes.
yes.
So we can have fun with that idea, right? And I think
Mhm.
there's something to be said for having a game where you know you can go like full tilt crazy power, but it's going to take you a while to get there. So I kind of like both. I like the idea of like incremental abilities, which are a little bit better, but knowing that you have something that's so good that you will wait 5 rounds to use it because you must get your full juice.
Yeah,
So that's what this is all
and like
about.
that also, it occurs to me, like it makes you play a little bit more tactically, like knowing that, like, oh, I've got to hold out for 5 rounds to get this ability to get to this limit break. So if I want to use it, we can't kill him too fast, because like it's more fun to do the dramatic thing and the suboptimal dramatic thing than to like do the optimal, like less dramatic thing, in my opinion anyway. But so like you got to tactically, like you got to kite the enemy a little bit, you got to not use your best attacks, and like but you got to save up, but you also got to balance them not wrecking you while you're trying to save up for this big one hit kill.
Yeah. So see, Fernando's getting some good ideas here. This is something that comes up a lot in games. Now, let's say you have somebody that's more experienced and they're playing, and they have like these really good ideas. Okay, I have two immediate thoughts based on Fernando's comments here. Number one, I am the person where I have played the game where I've been this GM too, DM, but where you're playing a game and somebody says like, okay, I've got this really cool scenario. I'm gonna like jump and grab the rope and swing across the room and slash my sword and do a flip, and they get inspiration, they get extra dice, they get whatever else like that. That's cool. But I'm more concerned about the person who didn't do that and making sure they have an okay experience in that scene. Because if you're a really forward, extroverted player and you've got some really amazing ideas, I don't want that to overshadow, pardon me, someone else and make them feel like there's no reason for them to have been there in that scene. But let's talk about this idea of limits. Now, I did have one other thing, which is in a limit type situation for this game, I had the idea of having a motivation and a preferred action. The screen's going to do a big thing, a big jump. So let's say that your character has a motivation rather than a class. I saw this as being something that could be fluid, but also, like, what is it that gets your character juice? Why are you going to be getting special abilities? So, motivation number one here on the list is you're a guardian. So you can protect other people, you can give them buffs, you can give them positive abilities. And if you do that, you're going to get more limit break stuff. If you don't do
That's
that,
so
if you
good.
go and you attack head on, you don't get limit break stuff. Everybody still gets sixes because the dice system just works better if everybody gets the same stuff all the time.
Mhm.
But if you're a brawler, number two on the list here, you've got a melee attack, you've got focus, which is just waiting to do a melee attack, probably in this case. But either way, that's where you're going to get your limit stuff. And you have a role. I like the idea that if you're going to have a class system, it has to have a role, it has to have a reason for it to work. I like power trees and I like stuff like that, but
Mhm.
I would want to know why I'm playing this character the way I'm playing them. And I think that's something that's always been very strong in Final Fantasy, that you get this idea that my character is good at X. And I like it when you can switch jobs. I feel like you should be able to switch motivations, but I would want to have this like, okay, I'm good at these abilities. I've got a cool limit break that I can do. I know that if I do my preferred actions, I'm going to get that stuff. And I'm just going to go whole hog on that idea. I'm going to keep doing my good stuff, and I'm going to let other people handle all the other pieces that they're good at. So I tried to
Mhm.
come up with a few motivations here. Like if we scroll down, we've got like sniper. Controller is the one that I feel the least good about. What I was trying to have is like, I'm a wizard and I do spells.
Yeah.
Support is your classic white mage type person, where healing, buffing, cleric, white mage. These two I honestly feel like are very weak. Centered, I want to have a summoner type character. Another thing that I'm committed to in this limit break idea game is also having a summoning ability type game. Yes, I really just want to play Final Fantasy VII, but what I'm trying to say is like those are really cool moments that I will last through a whole battle doing nothing until I get to that point, and
Yeah.
I like those moments best. So
Yeah, that's I like that. Like I like that feedback loop where like you do the thing that your class is built to do, and it helps you do the thing, the big thing that you really want to do. So it's like it's incentivizing. So like like the Guardians, it's the top here, and it's like sort of like you, sure, like you're protecting and you're like sort of defending, and you're not doing damage, but like hope like I'm not sure what their limit break would be, but like you're doing that in sort of in service of doing the big thing that will hopefully turn the battle around come when you do hit that limit break. And it does sort of it reinforces the fiction and it reinforces the play a lot, and it's really good. So and it's satisfying knowing that like you are the guardian, you do protect, and like you are being rewarded for doing the thing that you're supposed to do. It's like because there's sometimes where like in other games where you are the thing, but like it's not ideal to do that thing. Like what am I thinking?
yeah,
Like there's the Oath of the Crown Paladin, I guess,
okay,
in Sword Coast in 5e. And I really like the idea of that and the build for it. Like it's a very defensive and buffy Paladin. It's and you're aggroing enemies and pulling them into you and holding them in your area so that they're focusing on you. But like and while that's neat, there's no like sort of building up reward like there is with the limit break. And like you basically all you're doing, the ideal strategy in combat for that class is do your aggro aura thing and then just dodge. It's like
yeah.
it's with the dodge you don't even get to roll, and it's like okay, so like yeah, I'm doing my job, but like it's not that fun doing that job. But this like where it's like it's building on that, and you do art, you know, you're building up to something. It's super fun.
Okay, so you've just pointed out what is probably the strongest thematic failing, or like, okay, how you know you're playing a D&D type RPG. I could also see like Pillars of Eternity, etc., falling into this case, versus like a JRPG like Final Fantasy. It's not a totally fair equivalent here, but I want to get back to the limit idea. So, in specific with that, when you're playing D&D, you exhaust your powers. You start with all your powers and you exhaust your powers until you can't do any more.
Yes. Okay.
So, without being terribly pointed, it is exhausting to play D&D. Ta-da! That's my hot take for the day. On the other hand, if you played with the idea that you're building towards a limit, then you are building energy as you get further into play in the game. And honestly, that 5 second hot take describes some of the hardest interactions I've had. I play with a lot of players who have ADHD, and I'm not trying to make that sound good or bad. It's just different. And in their case, what can be very difficult is you start using some abilities, and there's that constant like, am I paying enough attention to what I have left? That's not always fun when you're not sure where you're going to go next. You know, how many things have I already used? Did I keep track of that? Have I run out of that? Do I have anything left that I can do? What's on the next page of my ability sheet, etc.? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So knowing
Like I
that your
said before,
stuff,
I'm really the player that like counts the inventory and tracks down that stuff. And as much as I do like that depreciating sort of stuff, it 100% of the time it will be always more fun to be gaining things rather than losing things. Counting up seems like I never thought, it never like sort of clicked with me that in JRPGs you're building up a bar, you're filling up your bar, you're filling up your meter, and in like sort of these other games you have like a set number of items and you're bringing them down. It's always more fun to gain and build up. It just naturally it feels better at like even as somebody who likes that other style of play. So and you bringing that up is super interesting, and like I love that idea where like you're building up and like bringing that into tabletop from like computer RPGs.
Fernando brings up a good point, which is another place that you see
Mhm.
this happen a lot is in shooter games. Team
Mhm.
Fortress, Destiny, things like that, where you have to
Mhm.
like build up a charge before you're
Yeah.
allowed to do something. Yeah,
Yep.
and I mean, honestly, I'm finding that very engaging. So the new Final Fantasy, for example, you get a
Mhm.
lot of abilities that are like fairly standard abilities that you can do all the time, but you
Mhm.
can charge them up to being stronger abilities.
Yeah.
And the visual is very engaging. Like, you know, I pushed X enough times, I pushed square enough
Yeah.
times that I started to get myself like a pretty cool amount of energy, and then you let something
Mhm.
bigger happen.
Yeah.
Something that I found very interesting about playing the Final Fantasy VII demo for the remake
Hmm.
is that you can't use any of your optional abilities until you've done a little bit of attacking. So, and maybe I
Hmm.
did it wrong, or maybe the demo is different than Final Play, but like if I'm switching focus between two characters so that I can control them separately because it's all real time, when I go into their
Okay.
command menu, if I want to use any of the options, I have to have a little bit of something built up or it just doesn't show.
Hmm.
So, like, I can't do a healing potion unless I've done a couple attacks.
Yeah.
And if I switch over to the other person, same thing there. You know, I'm back to zero and I have to do a couple attacks before I can do a healing potion. It's
Gotcha.
very
Okay.
possible
Yeah,
I was
that's super
playing this
interesting.
game wrong, but it's like it's an interesting idea that like you
Mhm.
must interact with the game in the expected manner before you're allowed to like get into the higher level play.
And like I think this sort of idea translates really well. Like it's not a specific like JRPG or a sort of a video gaming type of thing. Like if you just call it momentum, it's a
Yeah.
that's easily translates to like standard D&D European fucking D&D. Like you gotta attack so many times before you are able to see the weak points in them and hit them in the critical spots and that type of thing. If you just call it momentum and it's like you're sort of building up to this and like sort of get yourself ramped up, like it totally um it fictionalizes a lot more like easily into like into traditional sort of tabletop games than like building up a meter and a bar and things like that, which it is also its own very cool idea, but it's like there's always going to be people that want both both things. So I think but at the core it's a really interesting sort of mechanic to be
Yeah.
building up instead of depreciating.
Well, now here's another good thing that you bring up, which is let's say you've never played Dungeons and Dragons before and you start. There's that period at which you have to figure out how things work. Like you're saying, you have to figure out what attacks people are vulnerable to or what things do
Yeah.
max damage and so forth. Yeah, that's a tough thing. And if you've never played those games before and someone else has, then the experience curve, my personal like life experiences has been typically the more experienced player starts telling the less experienced player, here's all the things you were supposed to do to get the optimal play. And so you kind of condition a bias towards that kind of play.
Mhm.
That's fine, and that's going to happen no matter what game, I guess. But yeah, I guess a lot of D&D combat, it would be good. Now I just want to play D&D because what I'm going to do is come up with a whole bunch of monsters that have almost everything as a weak no, not weakness, as a immunity. And
Mhm.
then people will have to just spend all the time figuring out what the one thing they're actually
Yeah.
vulnerable to is. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's not do that. But in terms of like the
I mean,
idea of
I'd
like
love to
a
play that
preferred
game because
action.
it's a lot more. There's some more strategy to it than I go up, I hit, and I use my uncanny or my what's the rogue ability to move away. It's like, okay, I move and I attack and I move and I attack. Like at least then there's some cerebral element to it. Like oh shit, my sword is not hitting. My sword does not that does piercing damage is not hurting the skeleton as much as the barbarian who's using a club and does bludgeoning damage. Like let me go find a table leg and start wailing on it with a table leg.
Yeah, I gotta say, maybe for future, I gotta explore this more in D&D and think about like where are the fun points there. I actually have to run some D&D tonight, so maybe I'll come up with something for that. But in the meantime, yeah, I think the Clash thing that I'd like the idea of you having some basic powers, some cool powers that you have to work harder to get, and they're always there, but they need energy to be unlocked. And I also want to have that on the GM side. I want to have the bad guys who are doing stuff, and when you roll bad stuff for players, or when you're doing really well as a bad guy, whatever that means, you get to unleash some really cool attacks on them. Because the other fun part of playing Final Fantasy VII is when you're doing really good and you're almost at the very end, and then
Mhm.
Sephiroth, who is the big bad of Final Fantasy VII, unleashes this attack that just kills everyone you've ever met and their parents and their families and like their pets. It's so bad. And you feel very bad because you spent a 45-minute time chunk playing this one scene of the game, and you will do this again now. So, yeah, I mean, I can
Oh man,
appreciate some of that.
I can appreciate it in like not being a player at that DM's table, but like that's a really shitty DM move. Like, oh, all of a sudden, fucking what's his name, a Sararak shows up and casts this custom spell that doesn't kill you but kills everybody you've ever met in the entire goddamn world, and like have fun being the last person that likes you on the planet.
Wow. Well, I mean, that says a lot about how much I like myself in the first place. I don't know if that's true, but
Yeah,
yeah, that's our fun part. I gotta say,
liking
overall, I feel
ourselves
like,
is different than liking our characters. To be fair.
oh, dang, okay. All right. We've got all the hot takes today. Okay, so I think we're at the point where we're going to close on a good note here, and we're going to think about the stuff that we've done so far. So we talked about the fun stuff in closed fists, and we talked about maybe even like a solo tournament play. Like if you were paying attention to this stream and you've come up to this point, I hope that's something that people got to hear about and take away, because I think that is going to be one of the hottest things I could possibly think about. Imagine playing a Street Fighter type solo person RPG where you know what all the bad guys are and you're going to climb that ladder, and you had the best idea ever. So you have to repeat what's going to happen if you lose, because I think this is great.
Yeah, like you see the bad guys that are ahead of you, and like you're building up to them, and then like if they beat you, you become the bad guy. You become the guy who beat you, and suddenly they are the protagonists, and you get to shift perspective, and suddenly you flip the camera around, and like now you are, and then you continue moving up the ladder as this new character, and every time you get beat, you become the person that beats you, and like it's so much. It's like there's on the one hand there is like consuming the power of the people that you beat, but on the other hand, like shifting that perspective and becoming the person that beats you is super interesting because like you just and like it mixes up and then you carry over and like you had come up with something interesting like having points for where each of these characters had progressed on the ladder and then telling that up and then I built on that where like the next time you have a tournament their place in the bracket is determined by their points in the previous round. So like there's both this vertical and this horizontal build up, and oh yeah, it was super good.
I
And
am
you're
so mad
100%
about
getting a
that.
co-writing
It's
credit.
so good. It's honestly just, it's beautiful. I mean, that has to happen at this point. I mean, it's a very, very cool addition. So if anybody's watching this, first off, it already has Closed Fists out on itch. Um, I think you can drop a link in chat. If you can't, let me know and I will. I have the mod bot locked down real hard because I don't want to deal with a lot of that. I'm the only person here watching the stream on a moderator level. But long story short, that game is really good and it's a lot of fun. So if you have any friends, which we all do, I'm not trying to make any mean comments. If you have any friends that want to play a competitive role playing game with you, where all you do is you describe the cool fighting sequences you're doing Street Fighter style, it is very, very worth doing. We had a blast, Nit and I playing it. And with this tournament style solo play, I mean, honestly, I would never leave the house again. That's it. That's the whole thing right there. So
It, and also if you are more culinary inclined like myself and you wish to play some solo play of another really good game, you can play Kitchen Contest and live out all of your wonderful Bon Appetit dreams and be a solo play and pretend that have an OC Bon Appetit test kitchen tester and things like that. And Kitchen Contest by Hans Chun, highly recommend it. Highly, one
I
of my
should drop it in the
favorite games
chat.
right now.
You know, the other thing that's really fun about that is I do like the fact that you say that that's like what you like to do, but then you also go out and actually cook the food.
I mean, yeah, but like, I'm much more successful when rolling dice than actually rolling dough.
Well, I'm going to go experience that again in real life because I'm about to go turn over that bread. So,
Good luck.
yeah, thank you. And then we talked a little bit
Mhm.
about dragon riding and play sets. We talked about sharps, and we talked way too much about Clash because honestly, it's like the idea that I can't get out of my brain right now.
Oh, Clash is
But
really good, and Clash has gotten me inspired with some stuff that I think we'll talk about offline.
yeah, that's how we normally do things. And then
Mhm.
we'll do this again soon. I'm not going to commit us to anything because who knows how much we'll really enjoy this when we start thinking about it again. But the next time we do this, we've got to think about some of our other ideas we've been sharing right now. I don't want to just like drop everything in chat, but it's like we've had a lot of like very positive discussions about what kind of things you can do with play. And I have a lot of ideas for how to translate the kitchen contest. Like you already saw the dice and you have to tell a story to other
Yeah.
things. And I want to do more with that. I will one of these days finish writing the text of Dragon and Writing and put that onto itch. And this Clash thing I'm really liking, and it's unfortunate it's going to be a big book. It's going to be one of those things that makes me like, you know, like I like an RPG that clocks in around 20 pages right now, and it's going to be a big book. I
I
got to
mean,
get to
yeah.
like a V1 where I can make it like at least not that big, but yeah.
You see how Sharps is already 30 pages, and that's version 1.2. Like if I do revisit again, it's and that's not even like finished the inventory stuff and like all that other shit.
Hmm.
Like yeah, no, I get you when we talk about big books.
I do want to point out I really like your layout for Google Docs for that, by the way. That looks really sharp, haha.
Thank
But
you,
it's
thank you.
very nice. But like my Clash thing, it's like it's the boilerplate. Like it has headings. That's about it. Text. So
Well, I mean,
more work.
I did all this layout when I thought it was done, and then I looked at it again. I was like, there could be more work. So, like, at some point, it was looking exactly like Clash, but I thought it was finished, and I decided to go to layout, and then I decided I wasn't finished.
I give you credit for getting that step though, where you thought about doing it. You got it like laid out nicely.
Mhm.
So I want to say first off, Nit, thanks for joining me. When this
Thank you for
goes
having me.
back into a screen, or if we want to just do this right now, you should follow Nit on Twitter because you'll get two really good things. You'll get to find out about all of the games he's doing and designing, and also you'll get to see pictures of food that he has made, and also some good painting, some really good mini painting.
Yeah, like if you like different foods and breads, and if you like little painted toy soldiers, come follow me.
Hey, that you just described like everybody I know right there between all those things. Um, do you have any other stuff you want to talk about, like personal projects you'd want to talk about?
I did work on this little project that just came out this week. Unbreakable. It is a anthology of all adventures inspired by Asian culture, written by Asian writers, illustrated by Asian artists, with it edited by Asian editors, and I believe most of the admin team are Asian, if not all of the admin team are Asian. And recently, I had found out that is a copper bestseller on Drive Through RPG. So technically, I have contributed. I am a contributing writer to a best-selling work, which is a super weird thing to say. And there's a lot of great work in there. All the adventures are great, and the art is so beautiful, and particularly the art in my adventure. When I saw it, it made me it made my heart swell up and get all mushy inside. And yeah, please check it out. It's up on Drive Through RPG right now. It's Unbreakable, and it is just so good. Please check it out. If
It
not for
really is
me,
very
if
good.
for all the other folks, like people that worked on it were Death by Mage, known as Jackie, and Daniel Kwan, and Steve Huynh from Asians Represent, and I believe our friend Burst of Hope, who is in the chat, had worked on it as well. It's a lot of good folks that worked really hard on this project, and we're all really proud of the work we presented.
It's super good. I love it. So yeah, everybody should check that out. I put it on the screen so people can see it. It's on Drive Through RPG, and I've got the product links. I might as well just drop that too. On my part, I've got The Witcher Crimson Nash tomorrow, and then back to the grind. You know, doing more game streams, building more games in the background.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, chat, thanks for joining us. We really
Thank
appreciate it. It
you.
was fun having some more people to talk to in terms of questions and things like that. And to know that this was interesting to some people, we will do this again. I don't know how soon, but that's only because I have not been able to successfully kidnap Nit and make him do whatever I want. We have to actually communicate about that. So yeah, I'm gonna, if you don't mind, Nit, I'm gonna go ahead and take us offline now. And just again, thanks everybody for watching.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, everybody have a good one. I'm gonna do one of these.